Hello, everybody. I can see people joining, but we might kick it off anyway. So, oh, quite a few people. Fantastic. So, Chris will pop on their camera and speaker when they've got a second. Fantastic. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Alex. I am the CEO of SignOnSite, which is an absolute pleasure and a privilege. And yeah, we obviously have so many users of SignOnSite. We have over 700,000 people that use our platform, and we get asked a lot of questions by people, and we don't always have the answer to those, but we have an incredible network of partners and experts that we speak to all of the time. And we know that a lot of prospects and customers are interested in doing ISO certification. So we thought we'd ask one of our favorite partners in this space, Chris Haddrill, to come in and answer some questions for you all today. So Chris, I would love if you could tell us about your career to date, how you got to this point, and yeah, basically a little bit about Risk and Safety Solutions, your company.
Thanks, Alex, and yeah, happy to be part of the SignOnSite process. Yeah, so my background obviously is safety management. I'm an engineer by background, and then 20 years ago or something crazy like that, I went and did a master's degree in OH&S. That's sort of a crazy person I am. So I've got a background in manufacturing, so I've run factories. I've had people work for me, and then I've got into the safety consulting field approximately 20 years ago, in construction about 15. I have ISO auditor qualifications for safety, quality, environment. I sit on the Standards Australia Committee for 45,001 and am an international delegate. And I'm also a federal safety officer for the federal government, working for the Office of the Federal Safety Commissioner. So, and we can go into all that in a bit more detail down the track. But I suppose my passion for safety came from, I had an incident where one of my people got hurt, and I said, never again on my watch. So I guess that's what still drives me today.
Wow. Well, a very sad start to a very, I suppose, bountiful career, really.
Yeah, it was. It was a changing moment, but I think sometimes that's what happens for everyone.
Look, they say that's what makes very passionate safety people oftentimes is an incident that changes people's minds about their priorities, essentially.
100%.
So you touched on them earlier, but could you tell us what are the 3 most common ISO certifications that are attained by people in the construction industry?
Well, that's pretty easy. The same ones we talked about before. So 45,001, which is OH&S, 9001, which is quality, and then 14,001, which is environment. So they're definitely the most common. There are other ones that some people will use, but 99.9% of the time, it's those 3.
Fantastic. And why would somebody get ISO accredited? What are the benefits to doing that for a business?
Basically, the benefit is it actually improves your business. And now some people do ISO accreditation because they're forced to, because they need it for a particular client requirement, or they're going for a tender requirement that needs it. But the bottom line is the whole ISO process is about improving your business performance, providing a safer workplace if you follow the OH&S process. If you're having a better quality product, better buildings, better quality finishes, less defects, all that sort of stuff, that gives you more it gives you a better business, and you expand your business. From the environmental side of things, you reduce your impact, you reduce your waste, and obviously by doing that, you reduce your cost. And that goes the same for your quality. You reduce your rework, that reduces your cost. Basically, improve legal compliance. And what we find with most businesses that have gone successfully down the ISO path, that their workers are generally happier because they're more engaged and more involved in the business, and they can understand where the business is going because it's got clear objectives and targets and KPIs. So you end up with a better, happier workforce and a better bottom line.
Look, that sounds like something we all want, really, not just construction.
Well, and that's the thing. ISO is for all businesses, not just construction. And that's the thing, yeah.
Awesome. So for everybody who is listening along, there is a way for you to ask questions of Chris, which we'll be answering at the end of the webinar. So you'll see down in the right-hand corner a little triangle, a square, and a circle. If you click into that, you should be able to go to the Q&A section, and then feel free to ask a question. You can do it anonymously or not anonymously. I'll ask a couple of SignOnSite team members to chuck some of their questions in, because I know that they have a few as well. The customers have asked them over the years, and you can vote on questions. So giving them a thumbs up will push them to the top. Yeah, so basically let's see how we go with that and what questions we get over the process. So Chris, how can a company tell that it's the right time to get accredited?
Well, basically, like, the system needs to have been what we call mature. So the system that you've got needs to have been implemented for a good 6 to 9 months, ideally 12 months, to make sure it's bedded in and people understand it. When it's ready, basically the key indicators that we look for is most people in the business have an understanding of what their roles are. They're following the system, they're doing the inspections, they're doing the checklists, they're doing the toolbox talks, they're following the process of what they're supposed to do. So they're the key sort of things. In general, it's, from the time you roll out a system, a brand new system, we say, it's 6 to 9 months to get it implemented. And then in that first 12 months is when you start to go through the accreditation process. And I guess the other big key indicators, if you've got a system and you're following it and you're doing your own internal audits, and if you're finding that your safety is improving, your defects are going down, your incidents are going down, and people are closing out their actions, then that's a perfect time to start getting on and getting yourself accredited. Because that way it's easy to demonstrate that you're following the system and making a difference.
That's it. So sort of what I heard from that is that you shouldn't wait for ISO accreditation to develop good internal practices around safety, environment, and Q&A. You should have good practices around those 3 things and then go for ISO.
Correct. So ISO certification is just really is the verification that you are following your own system, essentially. That's essentially what we're talking about. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, should people go for all 3, or should they do just one and see how they're feeling after that?
No, my definite approach is, for most businesses, I would go for all 3 at once, because their systems, and we'll talk about this in the next bit a little bit, are designed to be integrated. So if you're going for safety, the formats and the structures of those ISO standards are common across the 3 safety, quality, environment. So if you do one, you may as well do all 3 at once. Obviously, that's going to be more efficient. It's going to be more cost effective. So you don't have to go through 3 separate accreditation audits. You simply go through one audit. There obviously is a bit extra cost in that first audit, but that's still going to be cheaper than doing 3 completely separate audits, plus the time, the money, all the resources you're tying up in doing audits. So I think definitely is to do the 3 at once is certainly my recommendation. And if there is one that you wanted to choose, well, obviously my background is safety and risk and what preventing harm to people. So I would obviously go for 45,001, the OH&S standard, as your first priority. That way, if you don't hurt anyone while you're doing business, then you're a long way ahead.
Fantastic. You mentioned in there an integrated management system. Can you take us through what that is? Because I think that's a very common theme for any of these certifications.
Yeah, well, integrated is by name what you hear. And as I said before, those 3 standards, 45,001, 14, and 9,001, they're what ISO call management standards. So they basically have the same structure for those documents. So there's the first probably 10 sections are all the similar structure, looking at context of the organisation, risks, opportunities, processes, organisational control. All those things are pretty much common across the 3 standards. So if you have the system for one, then you have the bones for the system for all 3. So the idea then is, once you have the basic format and the structure, to make them an integrated system, it makes it simpler, easier for you to implement and manage. So you just have one system that manages all of your key controls like safety, quality, and environment. So take, for example, if you have a defect or an incident or an environmental impact, they're all managed the same way. You don't have to have a separate form if it's a safety incident. You don't have to have a separate form if it's a quality or a defect incident. You don't have to have a separate form if it's environmental incident where we spilt something down a drain or had a big dust issue explosion. So you have one form that covers it all, and then you have one corrective action and non-conformance process that manages that, and then you have a tracking system that closes out those corrective actions and makes sure they're effective. So the whole point of having it integrated is that you've got one simple document which manages all three of the systems. There was a trend probably back 10 years ago, driven sometimes out of our friendly state and federal governments, where you had to have a quality plan, a safety plan, and an environment plan, and they were all different because they went to different departments in the government, and no one wanted to talk to each other. But there still is a little bit of that at infrastructure level that still does occur to some degree, but certainly in the spaces of jobs, less than 100 million and down to 5 to 4 and a few 100,000, it makes enormous sense to have it just in one simple document, one simple system, and one set of forms that will do just about everything you need it to do.
I can see now why it's definitely more beneficial to do all three at once if you're going to have an integrated management system. Paying for 3 separate audits on the same document just doesn't sound like it makes any sense.
Well, it doesn't, and that's the whole thing. And there was traditionally, in a business, you'd have a safety manager, a quality manager, and in some of the bigger businesses, they even have an environmental manager or now sustainability manager. It doesn't make sense that those roles are divorced from each other. They all should be married in that sense.
Absolutely. Now, can you take us through a little bit about what the key requirements are for obtaining a certification? So obviously you want to have an IMS, you want to have a system in place already to some extent. What else do people need to have?
Yeah, so you have to have a full documented system. An ISO is not that prescriptive in the sense that you can do it with flowcharts, you can do it with procedures, you can do it with one document, you can do it with 75 documents. It doesn't tell you exactly what you have to do, but there is a whole bunch of criteria in each of those standards, like I said, the clauses that you have to show compliance to, and that's the first step of doing your ISO certification. So what the first step is, once you've got your system up and running, then you will contact a certifying body like ourselves, or we work with certifying bodies like Global Mark and those guys. So you'll contact the certifying body. They will then send you out a checklist for the stage 1 audit, what we call the stage 1 audit. And that stage 1 audit is basically where 1 or 2 auditors will come to site and they'll go through your whole IMS system, or just whatever system you're going for, but say for this example, IMS, and we'll look at each clause of the standard, and then we'll look for evidence to make sure that you've got something in your system that satisfies the requirements of that clause. So you do that as just an audit process, which everyone's been through in various shapes or forms. And then at the end of that process, there'll either be a whole bunch of gaps, which will be called non-conformances or major and minor non-conformances. And then once all the major ones are closed out, then you'll be going through to stage 2, which is where, probably depending on how you go through stage 1, a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months later, depending on time frames, the auditors will come back to site to then look for evidence of implementation. So that's where they'll go and visit sites, and they'll go and look at toolbox records, they'll go and look at its ITP records, they'll go and look at inspections, they'll look at incident reports, incident investigations, emergency drills, evacuation. So just checking through that you have done all the things that you should have done, and you've completed the forms correctly, you've implemented corrective actions, you've closed them out. And then the big kicker that most people struggle with when it comes to getting their certification is that after 1 year, you need to have a management review. And most people say, I will review our system every 12 months, which is okay once you've had a system for 2-3 years. But certainly in that first year, you certainly need to be reviewing your system at least every 6 months, if not every 4 months, every 3 to 4 months, to make sure you are complying and are getting things right. So that's the sort of process. It's usually somewhere between 3 to 5 day period to get it to get through your stages for an IMS certification.
How long does the full certification process take?
Yeah, well, there's a how long's a piece of string question. Look, it obviously, I'll give the standard consulting answer. It depends on the business, the whole the resources, all that, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is it's 6 to 12 months is sort of the general range for the time you put in a system, get it implemented and get it certified. I mean, I have it done in extreme cases. We've done it in that 6 month period, but that's a real push, a push from the business to make sure that they've actually put a lot of resources in to make that happen. They've had to train a lot of people in a short period of time. They had to do a lot of internal auditing, a lot of follow-ups, a lot of review, a lot of commitment to make that happen in such a short time. It's all possible, but that would be the absolute best case scenario. But typically it's in that 12 to 18 months range of getting things across the line.
I think we all like to imagine that we're going to go in and it's going to be always the best case, but I'm sure anybody who's ever written a construction program knows that you need to be a bit realistic about what you're going to encounter.
Yeah, you definitely would plan on 12 months would be your average. 12 to 18 months is definitely your sort of average for the time people start the process until the time they get to the end.
Fantastic. I have worked at quite a few companies that have gone through ISO certification. One of my favorite anecdotes to share about particularly quality was there's a requirement that you do client feedback, that you get client feedback. And what we see in construction is that they handle that in a very prescriptive way. And we used to have to undertake these really exhaustive client surveys where we would have to harass our clients over and over again at the end of projects to ask them to complete this survey. And we had a consultant come in who was like, did your client send you an email saying this was a great project, thanks so much for your help? Because that's what client feedback is. That's how you measure if you're 100%. Successful, if you had complaints. What other mistakes like that are people making in the ISO certification process?
Yeah, that's a classic, Alex. I've had that so many times, and then they bring up and the people say, I already told you all this. Why are you ringing me 100%. Again to ask the same 5 questions? I already told you. And then the other one is the classic is, how did you go? Oh, our clients love us. Well, where's the email? I don't know. Let me find it. So yeah, so that's the definite answers to that is, but using that quality example is making sure that if you do get client feedback, have a folder, have a system somewhere in your system. You say, whenever someone gets a feedback at the end of a project, it gets filed in this quality feedback or client folder, and then we can go find it for evidence later on. Yeah, I think the other big things when it comes to that is keeping things simple. Like I said before, personally, I hate paperwork. So that comes from me from a compliance person, but I think paperwork is just your evidence of due diligence. Think of it that way. So if it's electronic, it's better. But yeah, keeping it simple. I try to keep a minimum of forms, 10, 12 forms is what I try to aim for in smaller businesses. If you have 500 forms, people don't even know where to find them, which ones to use, what's appropriate. Minimize your meeting requirements too. People will overcommit and say, oh, we're going to have a toolbox talk every day. Well, really? Are you? Or are we going to have a team meeting every week, and then we're going to have a monthly team meeting in the office, and then we're going to have a quarterly team? So be careful about what you say you're going to do, but just make sure it's adequate but meets the needs of the business. And the other big mistake that people make is they will buy a system off the shelf, for want of a better term, that comes from any number of consultants or bodies or anyone that supplies systems. And then they'll try to bend their business to make that system work, whereas the system should be designed around how your business works and customized to your business. Obviously, there's compliance issues you have to do, like legally, but it's keeping it simple and keeping that process that it actually reflects what your company does. And then it's not such a stretch for people to go and roll out this brand new system or comply with this system, because they're doing it anyway by nature.
we found that a lot, just getting people to complete safety documentation. You can't basically buy a software and expect everybody to, do their induction immediately before they come to site. You have to build a software that has flexibility into it. Otherwise, people will just throw your system to the side. They're like, I'm not going to interact with it. It's too hard. It makes me do it in a particular way that just is a blocker to me doing my actual work.
Yeah, and I think, and that's one of the biggest things is if the system is too hard to use, then people won't use it. So you've got to be realistic about what people can and can't do. If you're expecting a site supervisor to spend an hour and a half of his day in the office, that's just not going to happen. So you've got to make sure that he can use the system simply, easily, and electronics and portable systems, paperless systems are definitely easier, simpler, faster.
We talked a lot about the mistakes that people make. What do you think is some of your best tips that you've picked up over the years that people should do to make the process easier, simpler for themselves?
Yeah, I think like any change management process, it starts at the top. So leadership commitment is 100% everything. If the leadership think they're doing this and they can just palm it off to the safety manager and they're going to run it all, or the project manager and they're going to run it all, it's just not going to work. So it's got to come from the top. They've got to believe that this is going to make a better business for them, and then the dominoes start to fall, and it all comes into place. So by doing that, then you get the engagement of the people, you get the engagement of the site managers, the project managers, everybody through the whole system is part of the process. Other things is, like I said before, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it, and make sure that the system, whoever's designing or providing or helping you get a new system, make sure that they're designing it to meet your needs. Don't make them run roughshod over you, I guess. So yeah, I think that, and probably the other big tip, one of the biggest inhibitors we find if you want a fast and an effective implementation, is that someone in a business has to own the system. There's a tendency sometimes where some people will get the external consultant like us to help run it for them, which is great. But if no one in the business is maintaining and looking at that system and following up day to day, week to week, month to month, then it's going to fall over. And that's probably the big trick, where it's got to be in someone's wheelhouse, that they want to be the system owner and manager, and they need to have the commitment to make sure that it's being followed.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Having it in somebody's job description and giving them the time to work on the system.
100%. And that's where the balance between the leadership comes, because, if you've got a CEO that says, I want an ISO in 6 months, but then no one has it in their job description and no one has time to work on it, it isn't going to happen. So, and that's the same with any change, I guess, but it's also part of the process that, we talk about safety, quality, environment. These are key things that make your business profitable. So if you're not doing them well, your business is not going to be profitable anyway.
Absolutely. And I think that really ties back into like, what are the benefits of doing this? Well, you get an improved business.
100% you do. And people think their first reaction, you get the roll of the back of the eyes, here we go, ISO, safety people, la, la, la. We're seen as an enemy, but the reality is we're an insurance policy. And if you do this right, and we get this right, your business will make more money and you will get more clients, because you're delivering a safe workplace, high quality products, and you're keeping your clients happy. What else do you want in your business?
Yeah, that's it. Happy clients and happy staff. Thanks for a very good construction project.
Exactly. And that all can be done. And the ISO is just the icing on the cake that provides a framework for you, basically. Yeah.
So ISO is great and wonderful. Tell us a little bit about FSC or OFSC. How are they different? You're obviously able to certify both, so you have a unique insight on this one. But when should a company do first? How are they different? All that good stuff.
Yeah, well, obviously ISO would definitely be your first shop. You would definitely do that as a first step to get your systems in place and get things set up in your baseline level. OFSC is obviously Office of the Federal Safety Commissioner. This was set up nearly 20 years ago. I think it's 15 or 16 years now. By the federal government, it is construction only. So that is probably one of the biggest differences. ISO can apply to any business, anywhere, any manufacturing, mining, any service. They can all be ISO certified. Whereas OFSC is specifically designed for the construction industry. Obviously, it targets the larger end of town, but there are quite small businesses now that have OFSC accreditation as well. So essentially, OFSC was set up because the federal government was spending billions and billions on construction and infrastructure. They thought it was not good politically and morally for them to have serious incidents and fatalities on these sites. So they set up this system to make sure that whatever construction companies work on these federal projects have a minimum level of safety, hence the accreditation process. So it is a higher level of safety requirement. The safety criteria, it does very prescriptive criteria. It's about 80 pages of requirements for high-risk work, to systems, to the whole lot. So if you have ISO, yeah, you're probably 60, 70% there. And when you go for federal safety, it's another, you got to do probably another 20 or 30% on top to get a compliant system that will meet their requirements. So from a federal safety point of view, it's more detailed, it's more prescriptive, and the evidence requirements are far heavier than for ISO.
So it sounds like ISO is definitely the first step for those businesses.
Most definitely. It's once you've got ISO, you've got your framework, you've got your system, you've got your basic skeleton, I guess, in that sense. And then when you have OFSC, you're putting a whole lot more detail in there around. And they don't, like I said, they touch on quality, but not to any great extent. That it's very, very safety focused and very, very high risk. So mobile plant, electrical, scaffolding. So, for example, there's a whole criteria for scaffold. There's a whole criteria for telecommunication towers. There's a whole criteria for mobile plant. So ISO does not get into that granular level of detail.
But given how many international people we have as attendees on the call today, I'm sure they'll be relieved to hear that ISO should be their number one priority over FSC, given that it's Australia specific.
It is definitely Australia specific. Yeah.
I'm sure there's absolutely a localized version of that for all of the UK and New Zealand participants on the call. For everybody that's been asking questions, that's fantastic. If you have a question and you can't work out the Q&A feature, in the bottom right hand corner, there'll be a little triangle and a square and a circle. It's the activities section. And if you go in there and click Q&A, you can vote on the questions that are already there to make sure that Chris answers the ones that you guys would like answered, and ask your own there. So we're really keen to see as many questions as we can to make sure that you don't walk away feeling like you missed anything, really.
Make sure you get a bit in or answer as many as we can, hopefully.
Absolutely. So now that, let's imagine, Chris, I'm a construction company. I've done my ISO certification. How do I maintain it? What is the processes for that?
So basically, once you've got your certification, assuming you have a good result in your stage 2 audit and you don't have too many non-conformances, they will typically come back within 6 or 12 months, depending on where they think the maturity of your system is. If it's a brand new system, they will generally come back within 6 months because you haven't got a lot of evidence to show that you're actually following the system. But then every 12 months, they'll come back and they'll sort of audit half the criteria. And then in the second 12 months, they'll come back and audit the other half of the criteria. There'll be some common ones that they'll do both times, like obviously the safety elements, risk, incident management, that sort of stuff they'll look at each time. And they'll be, depending on the size of your business and how many sites you're operating, they'll come back and they'll look at that criteria and they'll spend 2 to 3 days on site. So probably usually 1 day just going through your system, making sure you've been maintaining the system, all your policies are up to date. You've updated your legal compliance. So they'll be looking to see if there's been a change in legislation in the last 6 months. The new code of practice has come out, like psychosocial or something like that, or the new hearing standards that became legislated at the beginning of this year. They'll be looking to make sure that you're keeping up to date with that and the process for how you manage keeping up to date with those standards. And then once the system is basically reviewed and make sure that it's been updated, then they'll go out to site and spend, depending on if you've got multiple sites, it might be one day on each site, or it might be one day, half day here and half day somewhere else. And they'll just be walking around those sites and they'll be looking for compliance for those on those sites. So obviously they'll be looking from the safety point of view, looking at the high risk work. So if you've got scaffold on site, or you've got the excavations, making sure that there's fences around those, barriers around those, the scaffold's compliant, it's got the right scaffold tags, all that sort of boring stuff that our safety people love. And then from a quality point of view, they'll be looking for evidence that, you've got feedback from your clients. If you've got negative feedback, what have you done about it? Have you changed any systems or processes to make sure you don't have that negative feedback again, or you've had a lot of defects? What are you doing to manage that subcontractor, that sort of stuff? And then the same from the environment point of view, looking to see how you've managed your waste on site. Have you kept all your tip dockets? Have you, looked at ways of reducing your waste? Have you looked at recycling materials? So all those sorts of things, and looking basically for evidence. So when they're coming back in those, what we call surveillance audits or post-certification audits, we're coming back to make sure that you're following the system. So if you say in your system that you're going to have a site managers do a weekly site inspection for HSEQ, then we're going to look to see where's the evidence that on this site, that site manager has been doing his weekly safety inspections. That's the sort of level that people will be expecting, and making sure that they're achieving it.
Ties back in well to what you were saying earlier. Don't overcommit yourself to things that you're not going to be able to do. You're only measured against what you say you'll be doing.
100%, and making sure that there's swims in place, because that's part of your legal obligation. So if you have high risk work and you haven't got a swims in place, well, that's a major non-conformance. Because part of the job for ISO is also you need to make sure you're meeting the local legislative requirements, whether it's Australia, New Zealand, UK. You have to be compliant with the thing and with that legislation. So we also look for how your system integrates with the legal requirements for whatever area you live in to make sure you're compliant.
Fantastic. You mentioned a couple just then, psychological safety in the workplace and some new hearing requirements that have come into place. Are there any changes that have been made to ISO certification in the last few years? Or if you did it in 1990, is it still the same now in 2024?
The good news is no major changes from an ISO point of view. 45,000, which replaced the old Australian standard of AS 4801. So we had an Australian-based or Australian-New Zealand-based standard. The good part for Australia was because there was quite a few Australians on that international ISO committee, including myself. We influenced that 45,000 document to have a lot of Australian type content and very relevant to Australian WHS legislation. And as a result, we probably do lead the world when it comes to some of the safety requirements. Ours are probably higher than most countries, which is good to know. But yeah, in terms of major changes, not a lot. That 45,000 standard did come out in 2018. So next year, 3 years on, we are now starting the review process. So happy days. But in terms of 9,000, that was done roughly 2018 as well, and 14. So they're all in that stable period. There's nothing major flagged for them in the near future. But as things get updated, that's also part of the process. It's our job. If you're certified, it's your job to keep on top of those changes and make sure that keep updating your system to do it. And psychosocial is an example of where legislation has changed. So that's now legislated in most jurisdictions in Australia, certainly in New South Wales. The noise one is certainly a New South Wales specific one, where high noise environments, you have to get annual hearing testing now, or at least every 2 years. So there's all those sort of things that are constantly changing, and even industrial manslaughter is about to be legislated in New South Wales. It's already in Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, and WA. And New South Wales is about to legislate that as well.
Yeah, we always see an influx from each new state when that legislation passes.
Yeah, as people suddenly realise that they need to do a little bit more than what they were doing.
Yes. They start transitioning from reactive safety to proactive safety very quickly.
Yeah,
on that one.
That's exactly where we want them.
Oh, 100%. So While things might not have changed necessarily on the ISO side too much in the last couple of years, obviously we've seen a big wave of digital systems coming through, which means that the way that people comply with ISO looks very different in some organizations to others. Do you think that having a digital solution is helpful to people in undergoing the ISO certification process?
Oh, absolutely. I touched on this earlier, and it's might have been my passion, I think, for the last 8 years probably now. Digital platforms have really revolutionized the industry. It gives you access to up-to-date documents in a heartbeat. So from a compliance point of view, you know that whatever form you're using or whatever procedure you're using, it is the latest and greatest. You haven't got to go and look at the bottom and say, oh, this is Rev 14.2.1. Like, no one ever looked at that in the first place. You just need to know that whatever you've got on your phone or on your tablet or on your laptop, that's the latest version of that document, that inspection, that ITP, and you're using it. By having it electronic, it's so easy to document issues. So photographs tell 1,000 words, as we know. Being able to upload photographs, so take the quality one and the safety issues. You know, you see a safety issue, there's a handrail missing, you take a photo, you send it to the subcontractor, you say, I need it fixed by 4 a.m. tomorrow or 6 a.m. next day. And then you get back to you saying it's going to be fixed. Having your inductions done, you know, not having a supervisor sit there from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. every day, regurgitating the induction for the 17th time, that's not adding value. So yeah, having all that, having it simple, records are then automatically there. In the old days, you'd walk into a site shed and there'd be 17 lever arch folders full of paperwork, which was just ridiculous. So not only have you got the logistics of where do you file that, where do you archive it, in electronic systems, all that is right in front of you. You can just pull it up on your phone, it's there, it's done. Compliance is easy to track. But most importantly, it's so much more user-friendly. When I first rolled out a paperless system 5-6 years ago, and I had a 62-year-old site manager, I thought, well, this guy's going to be fun. He won't get this. And he thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, because for the first time he could take a photo, send it to someone, get it fixed on the spot, rather than having to go around, take photos, plug his phone in, upload it to his computer, write the report, send the email. He just thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. And from a compliance point of view, you know, by taking photos as site managers and project managers and business owners, that's your evidence of your due diligence. If you go out on site and you've got evidence of you interacting with workers, evidence of you attending toolbox talks, evidence of you being inducted, evidence of you, filling out permits, evidence of all those things, that's your due diligence, so that if there is an incident, that's your evidence you can give the regulator to say, yes, I have been following my own system and I have done everything my system said. Because where Safe Work will prosecute you, if it does go bad, is if you didn't follow your own system. And that's where everyone comes unstuck, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And look, we saw a really big push last year for incident and hazard reporting to be digitized more, which is why we did that big release at the end of last year so that people were able to do it. And you're right, it's the photo evidence. People want to say, this is what I took a photo of and at this time, and this is how it was followed up. But they want to do it in their normal workflow.
Yeah. And you want to do it now, just like literally everyone has their phone on them. No one leaves the office without the phone on them. So no matter what, you can walk past, if you're doing your weekly site inspection or whatever, you just take the photo, send it, done. And then there's an automatic follow-up, close out. Like, it's just that hazard reporting and the process is, and incident management is absolute gold. Yeah.
So we're nearing the end of our questions. We have a load of questions to ask in the Q&A. I've just got 2 more for you. What if people do decide to get accredited, where should they actually start? What's the first step that they should be taking?
Obviously, get a consult. But if you've got a person in the business that has a background in safety or in HS in ISO, then by all means they should start the ball rolling and draft up the systems. But I would definitely think at some point, whether you write your own system or you want to review your system, you should have an external person come in that has ISO experience, that has an ISO accredited auditor qualifications. that can then look at your system and go, yep, you're 90% there, or no, you're only 25% there. And then once you've done your gap analysis, then you can decide which way to go from there.
I love it. And if people think, hey, I like this Chris guy, I want to see what risk and safety solutions can offer for me, how should they best get in contact with you?
I think there's an email being put up in our chat, so just email me direct. We've also got our website, which is riskandsafetysolutions.com.au. So you can contact us through the website or directly through our email, which is probably the smartest way, because that way we may be on site, we may not be able to answer you straight away, but we'll certainly get back to you.
Fantastic. We'll make sure that an email is sent out in the follow-up email that we'll send out. Sorry, somebody has just sent it to me. Thank you so much to the team that are working behind the scenes to make sure that we have all of the relevant links.
Yes.
There's Chris's email if you need him.
Okay.
So otherwise, we will send you out an email with the promised checklist of what we've learned here today, as well as ways that you can contact Chris and his incredible offsider, Danny, at Risk and Safety Solutions. So you will receive that within at least a couple of, give us a day or two to write the checklist. You know, we want to make sure it's good.
We want to make sure it's perfect.
So we have loads of questions. I'm going to kick it off. People have been voting the most popular question, Chris. I'm ready to move towards ISO accreditation in my organization, but I'm experiencing pushback when it comes to implementing the necessary changes. Have you got any tips on overcoming a bit of obstinance across my teams?
So one, if it's obstinance at management level, then that's the first nut you have to crack, because if the owners of the business and the people writing the checks aren't supporting it, then it's always going to be an issue. So you have to try and understand why they're blocking it, and then try to get them across the line. The second one, I suppose, for your site people is ultimately this will make it life easier for them, and we will customize it to make their life easy, not to make it harder. Plus, they also have to stand that as site managers, project managers and directors, they're officers of the corporation. So by having an ISO system, it actually helps them demonstrate due diligence. So in the minute we're in the middle of 7 or 8 prosecutions that we've been asked to assist with, and the first question that the regulator sends through to the directors is, how have you implemented your system? How have you shown that you actually have audited your own system, and how have you gone out to site to verify people are following your system? And that's what ISO does. Well, a ISO system. Yep.
So it sounds like that executive buy-in.
Executive buying is huge, and you scare them that they're the ones that are going to go to jail. It's not the safety person that's going to go to jail. It's the officer of the business. 90% of the time, that's the director/owner, but it's also the project managers, because they are officers of the business as well.
Mm-hmm. What about, so like if you have a junior team member, what about when you're trying to get site managers on board with some paperwork? I know you mentioned do what you can to make their life easier. Any other magic you've got up that sleeve?
Well, yeah, you sell it down the path of get rid of all that paperwork, get rid of all those folders. You could do it on your phone. You can take a photo to prove that you've did it. It's all done. That's probably the simplest way. There is pushback from older tradies where they go, oh, I haven't got a smartphone, I haven't got this. So I always go, show me your phone. And I said, if you've got sports bets, you can operate this system.
Do we actually consider that when we're we're doing a little upgrade to SignOnSite, which some of you might know about, and we were like, it has to be like as easy to use as Sportsbet and YouTube, because those are the most common apps that people 100%. That use SignOnSite also use.
Yeah, so it is. There's always pushback. Anyone's going to push back change. So you've always got to think about the whole what's in it for me. So you've got to sell them the benefits of how this is going to make their job easier and how it's going to make their life simpler. You don't have to sit there and write out reports. You don't have to come back and plug your phone in to upload photos. It's all in front of you. You don't have to do inductions anymore. It's all on SignOnSite. All you got to do is just check it. Yeah, that's a big sell.
Yeah, absolutely. Have conversations instead of do paperwork. You know, we're a big fan.
I love the face-to-face. You can't get better than face-to-face.
It's the most impactful thing that you can do. Having somebody fill out their emergency contact for the 5th week in a row isn't going to be as impactful as explaining to them what to do in an emergency when you can look them in the eye.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
All right, next most popular question. Hi, Chris. Can you maybe comment on the benefits of being ISO accredited when it comes to commercial tendering? How does it impact your ability to land more jobs? And do you have any stories you could share?
Plenty. So pretty much in most Australian jurisdictions, any government-owned entity is looking now for ISO accreditation for any subcontractor to even get on the tender lists. So I know all of the New South Wales government, Victorian government, Queensland government, South Australian governments, you won't even get on their tender lists over about 2 or 3 million unless you have ISO accreditation. So that is a big influx of clients for us as well, because you've had these guys that have been working, doing small jobs for schools or health or infrastructure or some of these government things. And suddenly now they're not winning any work, or they've been told that unless you have this accreditation by this date, you're not going to be able, we can't give you can't put you on the tender list. So that happens 10 times a year, I reckon, for us personally, where clients approach us to get on those tender lists, because it becomes basically down the track, it'll get to a point where most government bodies, and then the bigger ones, and certainly if you're working for tier ones and all those sort of big as us, even tier twos, when they look at their subcontractor performance, there's a question in there going, have you got a safety system? Yes. Is it accredited? Yes. That it just go to question 25 instead of then you got to ask another 30, answer another 25 questions to get off and get on us on their panel. So yeah, it does open a lot of doors. It's basically a key to that. It's basically a seat at the table for a lot of tender processes, particularly government-based ones.
And, you know, if you're staring down the barrel of wanting to do $5 million tenders later this year, you need to be doing your ISO accreditation now. Like that, yes. 12 to 18 month average time frame. You don't want to be getting the call that you're not going to be considered for anything in 2024 because you're not ISO accredited.
Yeah, and that is often the panic call you get in like November. You're like, what? It's a bit late.
I'm sorry, we can't do that by Christmas. It's just.
I know, literally, I had 2 of those in November. I'm like, no, I can't do it. You just
look, I love the optimism.
Yeah.
Chris, any recommendations for IMSs? Someone asks.
Obviously mine. Yeah, look, I think the key is there are there's quite a few different consultants. There's quite a few association bodies that have IMSs out there. Again, anything you buy off the shelf is good, but whoever you buy it from, make sure that they have the ability and the resources to customize it for you. So if you just download all their documents, like MBA have systems, you know, master plumbers have some sort of, well, it's not really integrated. So some of them have, some of those industry association bodies have their own IMS systems, and the rest all basically sit within consultants. And you know, if you Google ISO consultants, you'll get inundated. But I think, yeah, certainly, obviously I'm going to tell you my system's the best, but on the sense that I know that the system will meet the criteria. So that's a given for me because, you know, we created it, we've audited it, we've got 20, 30 clients currently accredited on our system. So all we then do is spend our time managing that system and tweaking it to make sure that it meets your business requirements and doesn't make your life more difficult.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, just a couple. Okay, no, there's a lot more questions. I'm so sorry. We use SignOnSite for our site contractor management, inductions, etc. What functions in SignOnSite can be downloaded in brackets as a report so it can be kept on file as proof of compliance? I might answer this, and then you let me know if I'm wrong, Chris. There's loads of stuff that you can download in SignOnSite, but when you're doing you can archive your projects and access that at any time. So you don't need to download it and file it away somewhere. Even if you leave SignOnSite and no longer want to be a customer anymore, you can reach out to us and we'll find that data and provide it to you because we're very lovely people. So your proof of compliance, you're actually able to show your auditor that within SignOnSite. You don't have to take it out of the system to do that. So Chris, I'm sure you've been in audits and people have just pulled up their SignOnSite web app and shown you things. Am I correct or missing the mark?
No, yeah, 100% correct. And often my phone is full of beautiful photos of people's screens as my evidence to show that I saw that Johnny was inducted and he had a high risk work license and all those things. So 100%. There are still some auditors that are I need to see a hard copy, but realistically that's their own personal preference. That's not a requirement, provided you can show the evidence, and as long as it's in an accessible format. And actually from an audit point of view, I love it, because it's 9 times out of 10 I can sit in the office with the person and we can get all the evidence we need without even going out to site. Because before, you'd be trolling through folder after folder and they're running around trying to pull bits of paper out of, crazy stuff. But 100%, you don't have to print it all off. You don't have to save it to a separate server. It's all on SignOnSite, and that's all there. And if you do leave the SignOnSite for whatever reason, then you guys just get contacted. So it's certainly all there.
Absolutely. If you do have an auditor that is insisting on a hard copy, Chris is able to be your auditor if you want to do soft copies, or a lot of SignOnSite stuff can be downloaded as a CSV. So all of our flexible forms information, all of our attendance data, all that good stuff. If you have any extra questions, feel free to shoot us an email, support@signonsite.com.au, or if you have a customer success manager, so Ling, Julia, Carmen, or Renee, if you have interacted with any of them, they're incredibly helpful and they have to help you with this stuff. So feel free to shoot them an email and they will answer you specifically, because this was a wonderfully anonymous question. All right, a few more questions. Are there any specific areas to consider if you have multiple entities under one umbrella? For example, a property developer client, construction contractor, and an in-house design company. Oh, I've worked for one of these before. Keeping it simple with forms, processes, and having a dedicated IMS that works for the business. Is that sufficient?
Yeah,
given it's
you can do it that way. You can do 3 entities. We've got a couple of clients that we're in the process of accrediting now that have 3 or 4 different divisions. So you accredit the system across those 3 divisions, and then obviously you customize. The property development form is not going to need the same sort of forms as the construction side, but it's the same process. So you're still using the same parent system, and then you have custom elements within that. So yeah, 100% you can do it across various divisions.
Fantastic.
And we've got clients that have, from a manufacturing point of view, have manufacturing sites in New Zealand, Australia, the UK, Germany. So yeah.
Very possible then. Sounds like Chris has all the answers if you're getting a bit stuck with that one. Just 2 more questions. Does SignOnSite plan to evolve their system to incorporate requirements of ISO so that it can be easier for the end user? We do incorporate a lot of that into ISO, but yes, cheekily, I'm allowed to tell you this because nobody's around to tell me not to. But yes, SignOnSite is getting some very nice upgrades this year. So we will make things a little bit easier for the end user as a part of that. And then, of course, always FSC accreditation and ISO accreditation are massive priorities for our customers. So making sure that our system is as easy as possible for people to be compliant with their own systems, to be audited internally or externally is always a priority for us. So we seem to always be people's first call when they're about to get audited and they want data and they want to know how to do dashboards and things like that. So if it's not currently available within our platform, please feel free to contact your customer success manager and they will either help you create it in a dashboard, they'll show you how the system already does it, or they'll take that product feedback to our product design team. And one last question. Alex, has SignOnSite had collaboration with Risk and Safety Solutions to demonstrate how the integrated system is addressed within the digital platform offered by SignOnSite? Chris, you have seen SignOnSite on a few projects. I think we have maybe like 5 customers that overlap.
Yeah, I think there's probably 5 or 6 common customers. Yep.
Tell us how has SignOnSite done with demonstrating an IMS? Obviously, we don't have quality or environment within SignOnSite, but take us through the safety piece.
Certainly, so one of the clients I've got up in the Hunter area, they went with SignOnSite, probably 4 years ago now. So basically, they're doing their inductions through it. They're managing all their licenses and compliances through that. And that's one of the biggest things, is the verification of competency is a big thing across any safety system. So that's how they verify the competencies of their tradesmen. So all the electricians, that's how they check their license, their plumbers, all that sort of stuff. But then all their mobile plant operators the same way, where they make sure that they've got the right VOCs, doing all that sort of stuff. Permits, evacuations, all the evidence is there. When you do audits, it's just look up the system. You can see that they've done the drill. We can see that the drills are scheduled every 6 months, and you can go, yep, one was done 6 months ago, one was done 5 months ago. Tick, happy days, that complies. So yeah, it definitely makes life easier for them and for us when we're auditing. So yeah, it definitely works. And just the happiness of the guys not having to do inductions every morning is worth it.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, that was our last question. We have 3 minutes left. This is the first of our brand new webinar series. We're hoping to do a few more this year. So as part of the emails that you'll receive in the next few days, if there's topics that you want us to be covering, like I said, we have access to an incredible network of experts. I know we've already had a few requests for Chris to do some deep dives on auditing and how to smash your audits. So
Yep.
that will be coming up at some point in the next few months. So if you want to subscribe to the SignOnSite newsletter, I'll post a link to that just now, and we will always post all of our details of our upcoming webinars in that. You will also receive a recording from today and the checklist, the aforementioned checklist. And I see the results of our poll are in. When are you planning to undertake your ISO certification? Most people are unsure. We've got a couple that are going to start it within the next 6 months. Best of luck to you. You will not regret starting that process because in 18 months' time, you'll be done. And how good is that going to feel? And a few people doing 2025 and beyond. So excellent prep for them.
Excellent. Very good.
Thank you so much for your time, Chris. This has been an absolute delight. Everybody, we will once again give you access to Chris and Danny at Risk and Safety Solutions there. Go to their website, send them an email if you have any questions. Chris, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time, Alex, and everyone that put this together. It's been very enjoyable and hopefully very informative for everybody online. And thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.